Hi, everybody. Lori Goldman here for the sake of the argument. Thanks for joining us today. I had Huwaida Arraf on as my guest. She's an activist, a civil rights attorney, a mom, a member of Michigan's Democratic State Central Party, and many other things. She recently came back safely, barely, from a flotilla to Gaza, where she was on a boat with 20 other people trying to deliver supplies, humanitarian supplies, through international waters from Italy to Gaza. And her boat was intercepted by the IDF, and they were interrogated, and you'll have to just listen to her interview to hear the rest. But this is a problem. No matter where you stand on the issue, you should understand what the issue really is. And I hope that you'll join us again. We're on all social media platforms. You can listen. You don't have to look at my face the whole time. But please check in, learn, hear, and maybe feel. Talk to you soon. Huwaida Arraf, I want to welcome you to For the Sake of the Argument today. And I want to let our audience know a little bit about you. You're a civil rights attorney, Michigan Democratic Party Progressive Caucus board member, activist, and all-around powerhouse. You're here today, not just because of those things, but you safely came back to Michigan recently from a flotilla that was intercepted. You were on your way to Gaza, intercepted by the Israeli army on the last Freedom Flotilla. I'd like you to talk a little bit about what that experience was like. I think you told me you left from Italy. And can you kind of let us know what that was, how long it took, what happened?
Thank you for having me. I think it's probably important to ask or to address the question, like, why was I on this flotilla? What were we aiming to achieve? And the flotilla was and has been, I've been doing this for years. The goal is to try to break Israel's illegal blockade on Gaza. Some people may not know, but Israel has been blockading Gaza, which is a small strip of land. The Gaza Strip is a small strip of land the size of Detroit, where over 2 million people are effectively caged, unable to move, to go in and out, to leave if they need a medical attention that's not available, to go to school if they have scholarships abroad. They can't do any of that without the permission of the Israeli military, and it's generally denied. The Israel blockade has devastated Gaza's economy for years. It has killed many Palestinians and really destroyed people's dreams. Everything about the lives of the people of Gaza is controlled by Israel. And we've been saying that this needs to end. And so we have been advocating internationally, but also using nonviolent direct action tactics to confront and challenge this blockade. The first boat that I was on to try to break this blockade was in 2008. The boat that I was on just a couple of months ago is in the context of a horrific genocide. And I know that that word might startle some people, and we can certainly talk about it. But what is happening now, and it's irrefutable, people are being starved, deliberately starved to death. Every day we see pictures and videos of emaciated babies because baby formula isn't allowed into Gaza. And so the boat that I was on a couple of months ago with 20 other people, 6 of them American citizens, but also citizens of other countries, including people from a representative from the European Parliament, a representative from the French National Parliament. We were saying that we have the right to go to Gaza. Israel needs to stop blockading and preventing food and medicine from getting in. We were carrying, it was a small boat, nowhere near meeting the needs of the people in Gaza, but we were sending a message that the blockade needs to be challenged and broken. But we carried what we could. And what we could was mainly food and medicine and baby formula. And then we had the boat also filled with tons of stuffed animals that were donated from children, largely from Italy, because that's where we launched from. to the children of Gaza. So our boat constituted no threat to Israel at all. At all. And yet it sent out its naval commando forces to attack our vessel and prevent us from getting to Gaza and prevent us from bringing in baby formula and things that could have saved people's lives. Again, very little, because one boat cannot address the great needs of a population of 2 million people who are being starved to death. But it just goes to show that this policy that Israel has, this blockade, is irrational. It's killing people. It's being supported by the United States government. And we need to do something about it because people are being killed with our tax dollars.
How long was the voyage, or how far had you sailed before the IDF boarded your boat?
We were we were into our 7th day of sailing. We were very close, about 50 nautical miles off the coast of Gaza. And although Israel had been threatening to stop us, to attack us, I was really hopeful that maybe the world would put pressure on Israel not to stop this boat that's carrying life-saving aid for the people of Gaza, that's carrying teddy bears. Like, what kind of threat do we constitute? What can justify Israel attacking our ship carrying 21 civilians? We had 7 Americans. I was one of 7 Americans on this boat. But that pressure didn't come, certainly not from the United States. In fact, the United States provided no consular services, no advocacy whatsoever on behalf of the 7 American citizens that were attacked by the Israeli Navy and imprisoned and abused. Nothing. So the policies of this government continue to be shameful. But we were at sea for about 7 days before.
And you were in custody. Did they put you into custody and question you?
It was at night. The Israeli forces attacked at night. And shortly before they attacked us, I was trying to radio them from the VHF radio in the wheelhouse of the boat to say, we constitute no threat to you. We are 21 civilians from 12 different countries. We are only carrying humanitarian aid. We're carrying teddy bears. We constitute no threat to you. Do not attack this vessel. I repeated that message. And at one point, a Navy commander, is a representative of the Israeli Navy, responded to say that we are entering a naval, an area that is under blockade by the Israeli Navy, and they intend to do whatever is necessary to enforce this naval blockade. And I'm a civil rights lawyer, but also trained in international human rights and humanitarian law. And I responded that this blockade is illegal. Under international law, it is illegal. It is a form of collective punishment. Currently, it is being used to engineer a famine in Gaza, and therefore, no blockade that deliberately targets a civilian population or that has an outsized negative effect, harmful effect on civilians in relation to the military advantage that can be achieved is illegal. And so the Israeli Navy had no right to enforce a naval blockade. And as such, they had no right to use force or to attack us in order to enforce a naval blockade. We were civilians. We carried no weapons. So their blockade, their attack on us would be illegal. And I asked them again to not use force against us, to not get in our way. But they did not listen. They waited until nightfall. They jammed our GPS. They jammed our radar. They cut off VHF radio. They cut off our internet. So they cut off all communications in the dark, and they surrounded us. And then dozens of armed and masked commandos just jumped on our boats and took us all hostage.
Did they take you off the boat into custody, or did they question you on the boat?
No, they did not question us on the boat. They took command. They took control of the boat from the captain, and then they sailed it to an Israeli port, again, against our will. This was forcible abduction from international waters. We were still in international waters. We had not even entered Palestinian territorial waters. And then it took about, I don't know exactly, 8 to 10 hours. They took all of us, everything off of us. So we had no watches, no phones, no cameras. They took everything off of us on the boat. So we could not document anything. We could not tell what time it was. But it seemed like about 8 to 10 hours, and we got to an Israeli port, and then they turned us over to civil authorities. Most of my colleagues were turned over to the immigration authorities and were accused of illegal entry into Israel. To which we responded, we weren't going to Israel. You brought us here against our will. We were going to Gaza. Myself, I'm an Israeli citizen. And there was one other Israeli citizen. His name is Bob Subairi. He is a Jewish American, an elderly Jewish American. I think he's about 75, 80 years old. He was part of the crew, an amazing human being. Because both of us were Israeli citizens, we were taken into custody by the Israeli police and we were interrogated. They couldn't deport us. They deported everybody else, but because we're citizens, they had to deal with us differently, not with immigration authorities, but they could have prosecuted us. They chose not to prosecute us. When they presented the charges, I clearly responded, you kidnapped us. You can't say we illegally tried to enter Israel because we weren't coming to Israel. We were going to Gaza, and under international law, we had a right to go to Gaza. I don't know if that's the reason why they chose not to prosecute us, but yes, we were interrogated eventually. After all day of being kind of interrogated, we were released because the Israeli authorities decided not to prosecute.
Did they find anything that you were carrying that was considered contraband, or did they find only the things you've just indicated that you were bringing?
If they may consider baby formula contraband because they're not letting it into Gaza right now. One thing that many people don't know is they have, and it's not just new, but for years they have prevented basic things from getting into Gaza. Even when they say they're allowing some humanitarian supplies into Gaza, basic things like anesthesia they don't allow in. So now in Gaza, you have children, because Israel has created with this 2-year military campaign and daily bombardment of Gaza, it is estimated that Israel has dropped over 100,000 tons of bombs on Gaza in 2 years. That is more than that was used in World War II, which has caused tens of thousands of deaths, but also severe injuries and amputations. And when these kids have to be amputated, they're being amputated without anesthesia because Israel doesn't allow anesthesia into Gaza. There's testimony from countless doctors, dozens of American doctors talking about what they've seen and the horror and the fact that they don't even have gauze to treat people in Gaza. Kids are dying on the floor of the hospital. They can't treat them. And kids are dying of treatable conditions. If they are saved and they can be treated, they're dying because they don't have basic equipment to treat them with. And so wounds are turning to infections and killing people. It's such an inhumane situation that I think most Americans don't know enough about. And why is it important to know about it? Because it's our tax dollars that is sustaining what Israel is doing. And so it really is important for more people to know what is being done with their tax dollars. So to summarize, in sum, the answer to your question, we weren't carrying anything but food and medicine and teddy bears. And so Israel may consider that contraband, but nothing else.
So as we mentioned earlier, you're a member of the Michigan Democratic Party State Central Committee. Following your capture by the Israeli army, the Michigan Democratic Party chair, Curtis Hertel, released the following statement. We urge the Israeli Navy to provide safety for those on board the flotilla and for the humanitarian aid they are carrying to be allowed into Gaza. Israelis and Palestinians deserve a peaceful future, and it is well past time for a lasting peace to end the war, return the hostages home, and deliver relief to the people of Gaza. It's kind of unprecedented to have the MDP chair advocate for the aid you were carrying to be allowed in. What did you think of that statement that our chair, Curtis Hertel, made?
I had actually not read it in full, so thank you for even quoting some of that to me. I thank the MDP chair for releasing a statement. As for the statement itself, I think that calling for Israelis and Palestinians to live in peace. Of course, that's what we all want, but we also need to call for action, because words alone don't get us anywhere. And that's what's happening. People who claim to support peace just speak about it's time for peace. But what do we need to do to get us there? And so the fact that, again, Americans, Michiganders, are contributing to this situation where there is not only an absence of peace, but where people are daily being starved and killed. I think we need more. We need to say that there needs to be an arms embargo on Israel now. And so many Michiganders have called for that, and a large number of the Michigan Democratic Party members have called for that. In fact, there is a resolution that was brought to the convention that calls for a total, for Michigan, for the Michigan Democratic Party to be supporting a total arms embargo on Israel. And that resolution, unfortunately, was tabled, and it is now in the resolutions committee. And we're urging and pushing for that resolution to come to a vote, because most Democrats, most Americans don't want their tax dollars to be used to commit mass slaughter. And that is what's happening. In fact, every poll that is coming out that is taken across the country has been showing that an overwhelming majority of Democrats don't support what Israel's doing, want the United States to support an arms embargo. We're looking at about 75% of Democrats that support this position support an arms embargo on Israel. And something like 50 to 60% of Americans as a whole, including Republicans and independents. When you have a majority of Americans saying we don't want our tax dollars to support Israel, we need more than just statements that say everyone should live in peace. Yes, that's absolutely. But we have to stop the slaughter. We have to stop the occupation. We have to stop the genocide. And what are we going to do that is what I'd like to see.
I think the Trump administration is weighing heavily on what we have done as a country in that regard. And I don't know what we can do about that. But being part of the Democratic Party's state central committee, tell us how you think the party establishment is in this big question. Do you feel they're far off from where the base and the young people seem to be on the issue of Palestine?
They are very far off. They are very far off. And we saw the results of that in the last election. We've been seeing people, masses, calling for the Democratic Party across the country to do more, to live up to the rhetoric. But we are not seeing that, unfortunately. And what's happening in Gaza played a significant issue in the last election, and not just amongst Palestinian Americans or Arab Americans or Muslim Americans, but for young people, for progressives, for anyone that is actually looking at what's happening, because what's happening in and of itself is horrific, and we need to act on it, because anyone who looks seriously at what's happening will see that we are witnessing a genocide. And it's not just me saying it. It is Human Rights Watch saying it. It is Amnesty International. It is Israeli human rights organizations. We have two of the biggest Israeli human rights organizations, B'Tselem and Physicians for Human Rights Israel, say Israel is committing genocide. We've had genocide scholars, including Israeli genocide scholars, say Israel is committing genocide. And recently, the International Association of Genocide Scholars, so it's the most preeminent body of scholars on genocide, saying Israel is committing genocide. So we are, what are we doing in this time of genocide? I think a lot of people ask themselves, how was the Holocaust allowed to happen? What would I have done if I lived during that time? And I think we all would have hoped that we would have done something. Well, there is a genocide being committed now. What are we doing about it? And yes, the Trump administration is now enabling, perpetuating these policies. It's not just complicit in genocide. It is an active participant. But I wish I could say it was only the Trump administration. The Biden administration also did not put any red lines on Israel. And there was so much slaughter and starvation and oppression and killing of kids and that happened during the Biden administration. And so much of the Democratic base was calling on President Biden and then candidate Harris to do something to indicate that you are willing to change policy and not just to provide blind, unending support to Israel and billions of our tax dollars. And we received nothing. And this is why I think so many people were so kind of horrified and not motivated and didn't vote in the last election. So we, the Democratic Party, are living with the consequences of that, of the party not being willing to, again, live up to its rhetoric. If we say we believe in everybody having peace and security and everybody deserves human rights, democracy, freedom, again, what are we doing about it? And so I guess this is a call for the Democratic Party establishment to do more, to listen, to answer the call of the base on this issue and on many other issues.
Do you think the grassroots, especially here in Michigan, are pushing leadership closer to where you are? Do you think grassroots is getting a little more into the left, unlike the party?
I think there is a strong grassroots movement, but I think what we've been seeing is we still have a campaign finance structure and a political structure that supports undemocratic processes. When you have those with money and political interests and corporate interests that are dictating policy, then you are not going to have an establishment, a party establishment that is accountable to the base. So the base is calling for more. The grassroots is moving. We're raising our voices. There have been millions of calls across the country made to representatives, letters written, protests had, and calls and texts and emails, and our representatives, Democratic representatives, have not been responsive. In fact, we have heard from people who work in these congressional offices say more than on any other issue, we've been hearing our offices have been flooded with calls and letters, but the representatives are not answerable to the base. And there is a disconnect between what we're hearing from constituents and how our members of Congress are voting. And that is because of the corrupt influence of money in our politics. And Israel and those who support Israel have very strong lobbies in Washington that pour millions of dollars into campaigns. And so many of the majority of the U.S. Congress is still accepting that money, is beholden to that money, and is voting the way that the lobby wants and not the way that their constituents want.
So I take it you're supportive of an upcoming ballot initiative we're going to have in Michigan to take money out of politics. Guys, what's that initiative called again? I've forgotten. Michiganders for money out of politics, because I agree with you. Until money's out of politics, one person, one vote is a joke. So I want to ask you this personally as well as for our audience. This is such a hot button issue. I have friends that we can't discuss this issue without tempers raising. I converted to Judaism almost 30 years ago. I have 4 children. They were all raised in the Jewish faith. And I believe, as many, many people I know, Jewish and Israel's right to exist. But if you can't discuss an issue, I don't think you can solve problems or raise awareness. So what do you say to people who are torn on this issue or overwhelmed or maybe too heavily on one side or the other? What can you say to them?
Well, I agree with you that we have to be able to discuss an issue. But I also recognize that so many people have immediately shut down when there is any kind of criticism of Israel. And that is I think that's an unjustifiable position. For example, we should be able to criticize any government. We certainly criticize our own government here all the time. But what we're seeing in the U.S. is criticism of Israel not only being shut down, but actually being punished on universities, in the workplace, even the government, the Trump administration, going after students and others on visas or who even have green cards, are legal permanent residents, and trying to deport them for being vocal or having thoughts about Palestinian freedom and rights. To those who automatically shut down when there's criticism of Israel, what can I say except urge people to ask themselves why? Because it is wrong to think that this is an issue, that this is a religious issue or an issue of ethnicity. I mean, I'm Palestinian American, but my husband comes from a Jewish family. We teach our kids to respect all religions. I'm Catholic, but they certainly participate, our kids, in my husband's family's religious celebrations. We want them to be accepting of everybody. There isn't this division. We don't want our kids to see any division based on race, religion, ethnicity, any of that. And that is the essence of what we're calling for. Those who call for Palestinian liberation, we're not calling for a Jewish oppression. And so many of people who are active and most vocal on the Palestinian rights issue are Jewish. I have Jewish colleagues in Israel who are active on it. Jewish Americans are kind of leading a lot of the charge. But those who shut down just want to support this notion of an Israeli state at the expense of Palestinian rights. And at the very heart of it is the right to live free. I think anybody who supports that has to do more than pay lip service to that belief. We can't just say we deserve everybody having freedom and equal rights and democracy, irrespective of race, religion, or ethnicity, and then have an exception for it. And we can't be willing to talk about it. We can't be willing to talk about what Israel is doing in the name of Jews around the world. And even though so many Jews around the world are saying, no, we object, we don't want Israel. Israel does not speak in our name. And in fact, it is anti-Semitic to think that what Israel is doing speaks for us. Those voices are shut down. Why are those voices shut down? I think because there is, again, this very powerful pro-Israel lobby. It's not a pro-Jewish or pro-Jewish values lobby. And so again, I invite those people to look really at themselves and ask themselves why they shut down when it comes to this issue of Palestinian right to be free, because that is what we're calling for. We're calling for freedom and equality between all people. Like you just said, and I'll just briefly touch on this because it's a much larger issue of Israel's right to exist. Israel exists. I don't think personally any country has the right to exist at the expense of the human rights of other people. So I don't want to talk about what, a state's right to exist. I want to talk about the rights of the people living on this land. So I want to talk about how we can create a political situation where all people who love this land, who feel an attachment, religious, cultural, or otherwise, can live there equally, freely, not under apartheid, not under oppression, not experiencing ethnic cleansing because they're of the wrong religion, which is what is happening now. So saying, Israel has a right to exist, what does that mean when currently it means getting the Palestinians out, ethnically cleansing them, genociding them? I don't think you believe in Israel's right to exist that way.
Correct.
But to exist in a way where all people living on the same land can have the same rights, I think we all support that. And the question is, how do we work to make that come about?
Yeah, that is the age-old question that I don't know why, but has never been solved in all the decades that people have been trying to solve it.
I think looking at it as it's us versus them is wrong. There are historical wrongs that need to be righted. Absolutely. Millions of Palestinian refugees are not allowed to come home now, the homes they were kicked out of, because they're not Jewish. Like there are questions that need to be solved, but they can be solved if we put this in a human rights context and not it's a zero-sum game. Palestinians don't want to throw the Jews into the sea. These are some of the things we hear. Palestinians don't hate Jews. All of these things are tropes that have been built up and that have been amplified in order to create and support the existence of a state that is oppressing another people, indigenous people. My family is from this land before the state of Israel was founded. We were living on this land, and now we live as unwelcomed, discriminated against citizens. I mentioned I was an Israeli citizen. And the other part of my family is living under Israeli military occupation and apartheid. And that is wrong. And I'm not calling for get all of the Jews that came and colonized our land out. I'm calling for let's talk about how we can right these wrongs and create now a situation where we can just all live together in peace and security.
And abundance for everyone.
Yes.
Do you see parallels between the United States and our racial immigration, policing, justice struggles as we're seeing in Israel, in Palestine?
I do see parallels all over in systems of oppression. I think that we have the same structures that benefit off marginalizing and oppressing people. When we look specifically in the United States, we see the militarization of our police forces. We can look to the fact that so many of our police forces train with the Israeli police and Israeli military. And there's been actually a campaign led by Jewish Americans to cut that cooperation. We see the same corporations that are profiting off surveillance and building prisons here, profiting off supplying intelligence, technology, and also equipment to the Israeli military to surveil, to jail, to oppress, to torture. We see the same companies that were building the wall in Mexico, building an apartheid wall in Israel to wall off Palestinians. So there are a lot of those same kinds of interests. But we also see the U.S. policy of just unconditional support to Israel having ramifications to the rights of Americans here. If we talk about the billions of U.S. tax dollars that is sent to the Israeli military every single year, 3.8 billion just yearly, without question, that could be used in our communities here. But over the past 2 years, we've had over 20 billion more given to Israel instead of being spent at home in our communities here. We have our right, our constitutional rights to speak out being threatened. If you criticize Israel, not if you criticize the United States, not if you criticize anything else, but if you criticize Israel, you will be shut down. You will have your civil rights violated. You will be punished in universities. You could be severed. You could be deported. And again, we have to ask why. Why this unconditional support for a state that is currently on trial for genocide? And so we need to, and I want to thank you for having this discussion, because I think we need to be more aware here as Americans how we're supporting what's happening there, but also how that supports affect us here in the United States. That's such an important discussion to have, and not, it's not being done. I think it's easy to say, well, that's just happening. That's way over there. I'm concerned more with what's happening here, which is totally understandable. But what's happening over there is affecting what's happening here.
I wish more voters, more citizens would realize that the corporations, elected officials, those with mega dollars, they're the ones that reap the benefits of war, suffering, chaos. No matter whether it's here or it's there or anywhere in the world, they find a way to profit from it. And I know that this Gaza-Palestine issue was huge in the last election and contributed heavily, in my opinion, to us having Trump as president. What kind of weight will it play in the upcoming midterms, do you think?
I think that it will have the same kind of effect. I think that people who were and are outraged by what is happening and horrified are still seeing our politicians not doing enough and want to see more politicians speaking out about this and taking a position that supports what we stand for as a party in the Michigan Democratic Party and Democratic Party as a whole. So this is a call on Democratic Party leadership to be more responsive. You know, there is something that it's easy to say or to blame certain people or certain communities for, well, you didn't vote or you caused Trump to be elected. But there have been some research done on voters and research that was shared with the Michigan Democratic, actually the Democratic Party as a whole, and that was ignored. And one of the most shocking, I know from people who work in this area, that this message was delivered to the Democratic Party at the convention. There was a poll done that showed for every vote that Kamala Harris would lose if she took a strong position on Israel and Palestine, and if she called for an arms embargo or an end to genocide or something, for every vote that she would lose, she would gain 5 to 7 votes. And that the results of that poll was taken to Chicago to the leadership of the Democratic Party, and it was ignored.
Why do you think they would ignore that? I know people do everything in self-interest, but what was the self-interest of the National Democratic Committee to ignore that?
I think it is where the majority of the funding for our politics comes from. And it's not just the pro-Israel lobby. We also have the weapons industry that profits off this, as you said. So you have a lot of very powerful sources of money funding our politics that is dictating policy.
That's right. For the few, not the many, and fuck the rest of us. That's the slogan. What kind of commitments would you like to see from candidates running in the midterms to know that they are aligned with what many grassroots people are calling for regarding Gaza, Palestine?
In terms of what I would like to see, and also what the base of the Democratic Party is calling for. Certainly in Michigan, we have, as I mentioned, a resolution calling for an arms embargo on Israel. I want to see candidates not just speak rhetorically about ending the violence and peace and security. We have to do something about it. And right now, there needs to be pressure on Israel to end its genocide, to end this violence. There needs to be concrete pressure on Israel. And so I want to see a call for concrete measures to pressure Israel to change its policies, to change its ways. And that is, at minimum, a call for an arms embargo. Because otherwise, just talking rhetorically about all people deserve to live in peace and harmony and returning the refugees and all of that stuff is just lip service. It doesn't show that someone is really committed. It shows that someone is speaking out of both sides of their mouth for votes. I think voters want to see courageous candidates who are not afraid to speak up for what's right, who are not just concerned about what their donors want, but what actually the majority of their constituents want, and who are concerned with doing the right thing. History is watching us. History will record that a genocide was committed on our watch, and the question will be, what did you say? What did you do about it? So
I'm sorry to interrupt you. What can ordinary people that care about ending this nightmare, what can they do beyond voting to shift the conversation, to hold candidates accountable and our electeds? What would you suggest?
I think we need to show up. We need to show up where candidates are. We need to show up to their offices. We need to tell them that we are watching them, and we do not want them to continue to support unconditional sending unconditional aid, our tax dollars to Israel to enable this genocide. So our representatives need to hear from us. We need to demand that they vote, that our tax dollars be spent here at home, not to fuel a genocide at minimum. At minimum, and they can show up to candidate forums, they can call, they can write. I think maybe too many people feel there isn't much they can do. This issue is bigger than me. This issue is no, but this issue needs every single one of us to speak up. Every single one of us. Yes, maybe one person speaking up alone, it's going to seem overwhelming, is not going to be able to do anything. But if every single person listening here, if every single person that we talk to will just speak up, our representatives will be forced to hear us. And we cannot let one forum, candidate forum, one debate, one day goes by where they are not hearing our demands that we stop funding this genocide. We have had the entire Michigan delegation, well, the Senate, both candidates in the Senate, consistently vote against putting human rights restrictions on the aid that we send to Israel. I mean, that is how much the lobby controls. We have two Democratic senators. Senator Bernie Sanders has repeatedly brought to the floor resolutions that simply call for enforcing U.S. law. U.S. law restricts the government from sending weapons to a country that is using them to commit human rights abuses. We have plenty of credible information that Israel is committing massive, gross human rights violations. And so Senator Sanders' resolution is to say that we need conditions. We need to enforce the conditions on our aid. It's already law, but we need to enforce it because we don't enforce it when it comes to Israel. Why would our senators, Senator Slotkin and Senator Peters, vote against that, against enforcing U.S. law when it comes to Israel only, not any other country? We need to hold them accountable.
I agree with you. Huwaida, last question. What gives you hope right now?
It is hard. It is really hard to have hope because every day, as soon as I open social media or the news, I am bombarded with photos and videos of starving children, of emaciated children, of amputated children. Yesterday, I saw a baby with their leg hanging off. These images are seared into my mind, and it's hard to have hope. But we have to, we have to hold on to hope. And one of the things that gives me hope is all of the incredible people who I work with, the incredible people who I was on the flotilla with. Right now, there are dozens of boats at sea trying to follow our flotilla and break the siege on Gaza. They are carrying humanitarian aid. They are carrying the voice of the world. They are saying we're not going to be silent. And those people who are speaking up, even when it is not safe for them in the industry they may be working in their own job spaces or whatnot, who are speaking up, those people give me hope. But it is really hard. And I have two young kids. Well, they're growing fast. They're growing very fast. A 10-year-old and a 12-year-old, and I look at them and think, what hope for a future if we are not able as global civil society to stop what's happening now? Because international law is being trampled on. It is the U.S. alone is consistently vetoing UN resolutions to try to force Israel to stop what's happening. And if we are looking at a world where there is no international law, it's just might makes right and violence is okay and not everyone is protected, then nobody is safe. Today it's Palestinians. Tomorrow it can be any one of us. So that passing on that kind of world to them really, really scares me. And it motivates me every day to try to do more. And the incredible people around the world who I've had the honor to work with, to be in this struggle with, they give me hope.
Thank you for coming on, Huwaida. I appreciate you.
Thank you for having me, Lori.